again at the crossroads of trying to make sense of an escalating military situation in the Middle East. Tough enough to understand the strategy being undertaken by America and others to try and settle the matter. There's also this issue of once again trying to untangle the factions involved and how, if ever, peace can come to this region. Our next guest is president of the London Center for Policy Research and co-author of the new book, The Sunni Vanguard. Welcome, Dr. Herb London, into Midpoint. Dr. London, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I think that's a good place to start because the New York Times had an article, and I caught the headline that stopped me. It said, Obama, the president, Obama pushes Iraqis to mend sectarian rifts. It just seems to me as if we always come back to this, trying to mend these fences, trying to bring these groups together, and there is absolutely no way to really get it done. It doesn't seem to be possible.
Well, it's not possible. Well, by and large, what you have are Sunni Shia rifts that are not going to be solved through negotiation. ISIS has already made it clear they will not engage in any negotiations. There is only a military option that is necessary, and by and large, the United States is thinking through its options. Now, if you're thinking through options, you don't engage in a public announcement to that effect. You simply engage in in the inner sanctum of your White House to discuss what are the possibilities for the future. Now, air support is certainly possible. But the most ironic part of this is the United States will undoubtedly engage in some sort of collaboration with the Iranians. Now, here we are, the Iranians, the nation that has been engaged in significant rivalry with the United States, that has been responsible for terrorist activity around the world, is now going to be the savior of the United States in Iraq, just as the Russians have become our savior in the Middle East. It's remarkable that the enemy of the enemy becomes our friend, and we lose sight of the fact that Iran is also a very dangerous nation and dangerous to the interests of the United States.
I wanted to get your comment on this because after speaking to a friend of mine who's been in the military and is no longer there but was in the Middle East for a time, when Iran came up, she said to me the thought itself is despicable that we as a nation would work with Iran. What's your take on that?
To agree with that assessment, as I was suggesting to you a moment ago, I mean, the reason why this is happening is in large part because the United States withdrew from Iraq precipitously. The consequence of that was to create an environment that was open to ISIS confrontation. And they have made it perfectly clear that they're willing to engage in any kind of tactic in order to unite both the northern northern territory of Iraq and the southern section of Syria in order to create a new Islamic state. And by and large, we have sat by and done nothing about it, in large part because the United States has withdrawn. We're powerless. Had we kept a force of, say, 10,000 American soldiers in Iraq, that would have changed the calculus significantly. But unfortunately, we didn't do so.
So let's come back to something that I always come to when we talk about ISIS. It is fair to say that in the year 1999, even the year 2000, most Americans had no idea what Al-Qaeda was. Maybe we heard it, maybe it was an occasional thought process here. We didn't know. 9/11 hits, everybody knows what Al-Qaeda is from there on out. The government's known for a long time. Now we have ISIS, and I cannot tell you how many people that I speak to who tell me, what is this? Who are they? We do know, and I want you to expound on this if you will, please, that the person in charge, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, this is an individual who was released by the United States at one point, who was in custody, so now we're dealing with another splinter group. What exactly is their power base, and how have they gotten so strong so fast?
What you have to understand is that they didn't get that far that fast. They got that far that fast largely because of a political vacuum. There are only 4,000 to 5,000 troops on the ground. You have 800,000 Iraqis that form both the army and the police force. Surely they should be in a position of being able to deal with 4,000 warriors on the other side. The part about this that is most interesting, of course, is that this becomes a political version of Islam. And there are many political versions of Islam. You look at Al-Qaeda, that's one variety. Boko Haram is another variety. Daesh, which you're referring to now, is another variety. What you're seeing is that Islam is now converted into a political ideology in addition to being a religion. It masquerades as a religion, but it's largely a political ideology that is intent on imperialistic action throughout the region. And this is one dimension of it. It's not the only dimension of it, because what you now have, even though people talk about Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda has many different forms, many different varieties, and many different surrogates. So we're talking about a variety of different groups all operating under the same radical agenda, a radical agenda that by and large is influenced by Islam, but it's also influenced by an imperial political desire.
Was the United States caught flat-footed with ISIS?
I think we were called flat-footed, obviously flat-footed, in large part because the United States made comments immediately after our withdrawal, where the president said the war in Iraq is now over. Well, obviously, because we leave doesn't mean that the other side has to necessarily put down its arms. That's number one. Vice President Biden said that this is a time when the United States is now in a new position with Iraq, because Iraq will be a stable, democratic society. Please, both of these people are thoroughly misguided. Misguided in large part because what they wish to be true is not true. Because they make this wish, that's a chimera. It has nothing at all to do with reality. The reality is that the war continues to go on in large part because there are radical forces, tribal forces, over which we have no control. The degree to which the United States influenced that area led to a peaceful solution in 2009. If you went to Baghdad in 2009, it was absolutely peaceful. You could actually walk through the streets. Why has that all changed? One, because Maliki, the president of Iraq, is intent on creating a Shia-dominated society, forcing the Sunni into a minority position. On that score, the president is correct. He's got to unite both the Sunni and the Shia forces within the country. The other part of it, and where he is not correct, is to misassess, to have a misguided view of what the Maliki government was prepared to do. And that by and large, the problems that we are now facing is because of a very unrealistic assessment of what would happen with the withdrawal of American forces. There were many generals who told the president when a withdrawal was on the horizon that you must keep a force of something on the order of 10,000 troops in the area. He refused to engage in that kind of negotiation, said we're pulling out completely. Well, now we see the consequences of that complete pullout.
But is it also completely unrealistic for America to think at any given moment that when you deal with al-Maliki or anybody in his government that you're going to get a straight answer, that you're going to get a non-corrupt government, that you're going to get people who will actually do what they say they do if indeed we do help them?
Well, you can't trust anyone in that part of the world. So, I mean, that goes without saying. But one of the things that you want, you're not going to have a democratic society. So let's give up these utopian notions about introducing democracy simply because we wave a magic wand. But one of the things that you can hope for is a degree of stability. And that would be very much dependent on having forces that are capable of protecting themselves and protecting their people. Unfortunately, the training that took place was inadequate. The 800,000 people that represent the Iraqi forces for preservation of stability are somehow non-existent. They all left their posts as soon as the ISIS group started to appear on the scene. Now that's remarkable. A force of 4,000 can defeat a force of 800,000. What are we talking about here? A kind of replay of the Greek tragedy? It's remarkable to me that we see so few troops actually on the ground defending the Iraqi government.
All right, we have to move on then from the troops being there. We know that's not going to happen. We know that that is in the past right now. No boots on the ground at this point. But I do need to go to the past one more time after something Tony Blair said recently, where he rejects claims that he was to blame for anything that's happening right now, saying that if the West had not rid themselves of and Iraq of Saddam Hussein, the crisis in the Middle East would be worse. Okay, we're guessing. I understand that at this point. But if you take his statement for what it is, there are many people saying the biggest problem he made was going into Iraq in the first place. All right, let's start from there. Was that indeed, is he right that had we not removed Saddam Hussein, this would be globally much worse than it is right now? And again, I understand we are just guessing based on best guess.
Well, let me give you my speculation on the matter.
Please.
I think it's right to take out Saddam Hussein. I think what the United States should have done is put a strong man in his place and got out of the country as quickly as possible. That would have been sufficient. We could not build a nation in Iraq. It is foolish and foolhardy to think that we could do so. And I think there were many Americans who were misled. And so this is a bipartisan problem, not simply a democratic problem. But by and large, what has happened since is that the United States could have left a force in Iraq that might very well have preserved the peace.
Are we at a point right now where if you hear a politician anytime use the phrase nation building, we have to immediately think that this is a politician who's delusional, who simply can't learn from history?
Yeah, I think I want to reach for my gun anytime someone talks about democratic building. Look, at some point in the future, maybe in a generation or two, we'll see fundamental changes take place in the Middle East. At the moment, this is nothing but utopian thinking. It is not possible for that to occur. I just came back from Egypt very recently. While El-Sisi is not a democratic Jeffersonian, The very fact that he has the support of the military and is capable of establishing some stability in a nation that has gone through 2 revolutions in 2 years strikes me as remarkable. So I'm out there wanting to support el-Sisi, even though I believe that democracy as we understand it is not in the cards for Egypt.
In your opinion, about 30 seconds we have left, we're at that stage right now where we are discussing airstrikes. In your educated opinion, can airstrikes put a big enough dent in what's happening in Iraq to allow a democratic government to at least gain some control of the country and return it to some semblance of normalcy?
I think airstrikes will provide some control over the intentions that ISIS has of attacking Baghdad. I do not think it's going to lead to stability. ISIS is intent on moving ahead and creating its own nation made up of Sunnis in Iraq and Syria. That is the goal. And by and large, with Syria in disarray, there's nothing that really can stop them.
The Syrian disarray, I think, is a good way to put it, because Tony Blair believes that what's going on in Syria is certainly blamed for what's going on in Iraq. Dr. London, thank you so much for your time. I am very certain we'll do this again.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
All right, I want to remind everybody that his new book coming out is called The Sunni Vanguard. Here you go, America. Time to get to it. We always ask for your opinions. You can do it on social media, either via email, by Twitter, or by Facebook, and we will discuss those opinions here, because the opinion counts. Here on Midpoint, where every day we question everything.